So I always like to say thank you for letting me into your library because I'm the guest here and this is your home turf. So thank you for letting me in. So a little bit about me. My name's Sam Ducharme. I live in Woodstock, Connecticut, and I always say it's over near Sturbridge. Everybody in Massachusetts, everybody knows Sturbridge, right? Right. So, but I did work right down the road here at the prison for 20 years. I was one of the prison guards that you guys hate driving through town because we're all late for work and dying to get home at the end of the shift. So I was one of those guys. I had a pretty good gig. I was just a straight up officer, but most of my career was spent as a canine officer. And so if anybody is considering that job, I would consider being a canine officer. It's a lot easier to go through with a giant German Shepherd clearing the way for you, you know what I mean? But in 2015, I thru hiked the Appalachian Trail, and after 20 years working at the prison, I was ready for something like that, but it wasn't just a kind of a whim thing. It ended up being a whim thing because I decided in February that I was going to leave in March because people usually leave at late winter because it takes 6 months to do this thing. And I wasn't a hiker. I never hiked. Didn't have a backpack. I just was spent a lot of time outdoors hunting and fishing and stuff. So I figured, oh man, I can't wait to get in the woods after being in the prison for 20 years. I thought it was awesome. It would be awesome. But I had a little connection to the trail too, or I should say, not a connection, but an experience based on a connection. I had a place up in Maine, and I was a divorced parent of 2 boys, right? So if somebody says, yeah, I worked in a prison for 20 years, you can bet they're either divorced or alcoholics or something, right? So I fell into that category. And we spent, when I had my kids, the good thing about working in the state is you have a great schedule, right? So I would have my kids for 4 days, and then my wife would have them ex-wife would have them for 4 days. And we spent a lot of time up in my camp up in Maine. And my connection to what ended up being a connection to the trail is that if you walk out of my garage and threw the garage door up, took a step out on to the driveway and looked out, that top picture up there is Mount Katahdin. And so Mount Katahdin is the northernmost part of the Appalachian Trail, right? It's this 5,200 foot mountain in Baxter State Park in the middle of the Highlands of Maine. And when you see that picture right there with the snow on it, that was June. So you see that enough times and you just have to hike it. My kids were teenagers, of course, and they always wanted to hike it. And I always kind of went down like this, hey, Pops, can we bring Jennifer to the mountain? And I say, yes, let's set it up with her folks and let's get everybody out and we'll do it. And so we climb the mountain. It might be spring, it might be summer, fall, whatever. But then next summer it'd come along and it'd be like, hey, can we bring Taylor to the top of the mountain? Depending on how many times they broke up and got their girlfriends, they climbed to the top of that mountain. But this particular time, it was the end of the summer. We got to the top of the mountain. Anybody here climb Mount Katahdin? Right on. So Mount Katahdin is no joke. It's a hard mountain to climb. The shortest path up and down is like 5.5 miles, and it's just a pile of rocks. And so we get up there, and I'm pretty smoked because I'm only halfway through, and you get up to this sign. That's the sign. There's no snack bars up there. There's no cars like Mount Washington. It's just a sign on the top of a mountain. And so as we're coming up to the sign, and I'm pretty beat up, and I see these people up there, just a ragbag looking bunch, long hair and guys, long hair, threadbare, just dirty, stinky hair, long hair on their legs, and that's the ladies, but that's Maine. I'm not judging a lot of that up in Maine, but they were making such a fuss about that sign. They were embracing each other and draping themselves on this sign and crying, and it was, here I come. And I'm thinking, I just made it up this mountain, what's the big deal? You're overthinking it. And so I asked them, I said, well, clearly this is meaningful, what's going on? And they said, we just finished our thru hike of the Appalachian Trail. And I was like, oh, all the way from Connecticut? Because I knew it was in Connecticut, but I didn't know anything else about it. And they said, no, from Georgia. And we went through 14 states. And we went through 3 seasons. And it took us 6 months. And they told me great stories of the friends they met on the trail, and some scary stories of weather and wildlife encounters. They told me some sad stories about people they got to know that had to get off the trail because of injuries. And I just sat there for an hour just listening to them just tell me these awesome stories. And they even told me about 100 miles in Maine where they didn't cross an asphalt road. It's just a 100-mile wilderness. And I was just like, wow, that's awesome. So thunderstorm came and we broke up. But that stuck with me. I think that's a seed, right? So fast forward. Now my kids are grown. They both graduated high school. They both are, patriotic young American kids, and they both joined the Air Force. And so now this big house that was so small with all these kids coming in and out and cooking plates of pasta for, all these kids and getting to know everybody and having so much fun. It was just chaos, really. If you remember that having teenagers is crazy. You're either cooking or cleaning, or trying to get somebody up or calling to see where they are, So all of a sudden they're gone. My dog retired with me, right? So they don't last forever. We've all had pets, and he passed away. So now this house that was so cramped and crowded is now, one by one getting bigger and bigger to the point where, holy crap, I can't even take it. I got to get out of here, right? I said, but in the back of my head was that time when I talked to those thru hikers, and I said, you know what, I think I'm going to thru hike the Appalachian Trail. And it was February of 2014, which if you don't remember, 2014 was the winter from where. We had so much snow, all the barns were collapsing everywhere, people were shoveling roofs off, and I just was like, I just want to go to Georgia, get in the woods, and start hiking north. And so that was my plan. I went to REI, I walked in, they were like, hey, can I help you? And I said, yeah, sure. I'm going to thru hike the Appalachian Trail, and I'm going to leave next month. And I never hiked before, so I need everything. They're like, oh, clear all schedules. We got a sucker just walked through the door. And I bought everything they could sell me. I could barely carry it all. So that's how I got to the trail. Okay? But before I left, after 20 years of working at the prison, this was me. All right, I compare myself to an onion at the bottom of the bag that's all rotten and squishy and it's never going to get used for anything. I had a bad attitude. I hated people. I was a little prejudiced. I would go to a gas station and I'd see a group of kids hanging around with their pants down below their, and I would just stereotype them. I had a bad attitude. I'd go over to Dunkies and they get my coffee wrong. I want to run my car right through the side of the building. I was just not the same person I was when I started in corrections. And only the people closest to me could see the changes in me. I tried to keep a positive attitude. I did the job the same way I am right now. I just tried to just keep it real. And if I got to bite an inmate every now and then because he had a shank, well, that was a bonus, But I wasn't the same guy. And this is kind of how I pictured myself. I was that onion. It wasn't going to get chosen, probably shouldn't get chosen for a stew or anything. It was just rotten and it just needed to be thrown out in the woods. So I self-threw myself out in the woods. Now, for those of you who not real familiar with the trail, it starts in northern Georgia and it just cruises right up the East Coast all the way up to northern Maine. And it is very remote in places. But keep in mind, the East Coast is where, 2/3 of the United States population lives. So you have to go through a lot of towns, you cross a lot of roads. So you're never really out there, we're not up in the Arctic Circle or anything. But it is a long way. It was 2,189 0.2 miles from end to end. And when I started, I was like, I never really hiked. I mean, I always brought my tree stands out in the woods, and I try to get out there deep. I had a trap line for years, so I spent a lot of time in the woods checking my traps at 1 o'clock in the morning after getting out of work at the prison. So I was very comfortable in the woods, but I never did anything like that. So honestly, my expectations were low. I broke my back, I broke my neck, and within 15 years of this, so I have good days and bad days. So I wasn't really expecting to get very far, but in fact, I didn't even know anything about the trail other than where it went. I did a little research on YouTube, like we all do now. If we need to change the oil in our car, we look it up on YouTube. But that's it. 13 states. 2,000 miles. Well, it's a long trail. But I didn't need a map. I didn't need a GPS. I didn't need a compass or anything. All I did was follow these white blazes. They paint them on the trees, on both sides of the trees. So you got to make sure when you go in the woods to use the little boys' room, you continue in the same direction you were traveling. But I figured as long as I keep following these blazes, I don't even need a map. I had one. I had a little guidebook to tell me how far the next town was down the road and stuff. Any Jeopardy people in here last night? This book was on Jeopardy. Yeah, the author was real excited. We're friends on Facebook. But the trail isn't really that old. It was finished in 1936, so it's not like the Indians used it to go to hunting grounds, to summer grounds, to winter grounds. It's just a trail that was designed for hiking. And back then they just wanted an escape from city life and the stressors of modern life, so that was it. I figured when I'm tired, I'll put a hammock up, and when I'm not tired, I'll just keep walking. Now these trails are marked with these white blazes on trees, but they're also on rocks. Like you can see the blazes up here. Here, a section of trail on the rocks and the trees, and here's one right here. You just keep following them blazes. It's kind of like a fun little explorer. Where's it going to lead me? Some places, like here in North Carolina, on top of a mountain, which has been cleared for agriculture. This is a cool place. It's called. Can you imagine that? I get nervous in front of people, okay? It'll come to me. But anyway, this used to be just a regular mountaintop like all the others. But somebody cleared the top for agriculture. And the mountains over there are only 2,500, 3,500 feet high. They have good soil. They get good sunshine. They get good rain. So here it is, a couple hundred years later, and it's still being used for agriculture. But there's no trees, there's no rocks to paint blazes, so they dig a hole, put a post in the ground, and run the blazes that way. Yeah, there's a lot of agricultural land that the Appalachian Trail Conservancy now owns for this trail, and this you can see, the corn is starting to come up. It's June, it's here. We have this thing up here, knee-high by 4th of July, and we should be all right. This is June, and it's already up to my shoulder. But they put posts in the ground. They're 10 feet high. No matter what crop they plant, you can still find the next blaze. And of course, this beautiful doe just popped out in front of me. I just had enough time to get my camera out, snap a picture, and then she just walked off, and I was standing there wondering, did that just happen, On the top of some of the mountains, especially up north, there's no trees, there's no rocks, and if you could picture this covered in snow, if you wanted to follow the trail, it'd be impossible. So they build these cairns of just piles of rocks, and those are used strictly for navigating. So the whole trail is maintained by volunteers, unless there's a construction project that needs to be done. Of course, they hire for that. But one of the jobs the volunteers do is keep these cairns up so people don't get lost. So I didn't think navigation was going to be a big problem. I just followed the blazes and the cairns. Now this is how I slept at night. This is the only time I actually got lost on the trail. This is the very first night. I climbed up another couple hundred feet to sleep on top of a mountain because I wanted to see a sunrise, and I overslept the sunrise because I was so tired. And then when I got off the mountain, I walked in the wrong direction. So thank God for Google. That's all I can say. Google Maps. So I slept in a hammock. Like I mentioned earlier, I have a bad back. So I sleep well in a hammock, and I figured there's a lot of trees in the woods, so it would be good. I used it a lot prior to this, so I knew it would be comfortable. I have like a sleeping bag that goes under it. It's called the underquilt. So in the winter, it keeps me warm. And I have a sleeping bag on top of me. And if the weather got bad, I would unroll this tarp and put it out over me to keep the snow and rain off me. At the end of the day, I just throw my clothes up into a tree branch, and because you're sweating. You're just sweating from the time, within a mile, mile and a half, you heat up, and then you're hot for the rest of the day. And so I learned quickly that when you hang your clothes up to dry, they'll be good and frozen in the morning for when you put them back on. They don't dry out, unfortunately. This is another setup, just with the tarp out, hang up my clothes with hopes that they might dry a little bit at night. It was still winter here, even though it's warm down there now. If you looked at the Weather Channel, you'd see that, Atlanta, Georgia was 75 degrees today or something. But once you get up into the mountains of the Appalachians, or the Appalachians, as they say down there, it's cold and the wind's blowing. So I slept with cotton long johns. I've never hiked before, so I learned a lot. But cotton is a no-no for these people, for backpacking, But I learned. I also slept on the ground at times. If it was a really cool place, I would just set my tarp up like a tent and sleep on the ground. This is my buddy Red Hot from Maine, and he was a tent guy. I was a hammock guy, and in this case, he had the advantage because he didn't get bit by bugs this night. I did. I could have slept in one of these. This is a shelter, or if you're in New Hampshire, it's called a hut, or if you're in Maine, it's called a lean-to. There's a lot, 252 of them along the trail. So you could theoretically sleep in one every night. They're all basically made the same way. They have 3 walls with a wooden platform and an open end. The platform gets you off the ground. They usually are set up to protect you from the prevailing winds and to keep you dry, of course at night or during the day, depending on what's happening. But a lot of people will just stay in these during thunderstorms and never sleep in them, just, stop for lunches. I forgot what I was going to say. They usually put them next to water sources, so if you camp for the night, you can get some fresh water. We always filter our water. You don't know what died upstream, so you can take that stuff out of the water. And also, a lot of these have privies. So a lot of people who want to go out in the woods for 6 months really don't want to go out in the woods, for 6 months. So those are the advantages. But the reason the Appalachian Trail Conservancy does this is that most of the people will camp near or in these things. And what it does is it lowers the impact on the environment. So people aren't camping everywhere. They're mostly all camping around certain areas. That's good and bad. It's less impact on the environment, right? Especially if there's a privy, we don't have people pooping all over the forest. But one of the disadvantages is that the bears get used to it, the mice, the snakes, the skunks and stuff. They all know where the hikers are dropping their food crumbs and stuff. So there's plus and minuses. I like the fact that there's a picnic table there. In 2020, just a few years after I did it, of course, the coronavirus hit, and they told the hikers, go home. We don't want you going into towns, getting people sick. We don't want you getting sick. It's not healthy to have everybody coughing and sneezing all over each other and these things and using picnic tables and stuff. So for a couple of years, the trail got really quiet. There's still the hardcore people, but they're pretty, this is a big part of the hike, and it's a big part of the social factor of the trail. This one is in Pennsylvania. This is probably the nicest one on the trail. You have a steel roof, a cupola, hanging plant. This is a snoring section. That's a non-snoring section. I mean, it's pretty nice. This is in New York. This is one of the early ones. They made all the local rocks. This thing's out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you couldn't carry anything out to it. And if you are into rodents, this is the one you want to stay at. And there's one of the privies. Of course, after working 20 years in the prison, I had my friends call me a germphobe. I think I got it under control now. I'll shake people's hands and stuff. But you learn a lot in the prison. You learn about norovirus, hepatitis, tuberculosis, all of them, right? So when it was just building for 20 years, I guess, and I don't like germs, and these things are disgusting. And the year I went, they had only 20,000 people had finished this hike at the end of the year I went, so it was like 17,000 when I started. And now it's super popular. Already over 4,000 people have already taken off. It's not even March 15th yet, so it's real popular. So these things get hammered pretty hard. The volunteers are trained how to take care of their, most of them older and privies, how to keep them. They keep moving them around and digging holes. There's a whole process to it, but I didn't use any of them because of the germs. So what did I do? Right? Probably not what you came here for, but we're going to talk about it. So if you practice leave no trace in the woods, right? You pick up your garbage. You don't put anything in your fire pit. You don't crunch down vegetations because it's a nice place to put your tent and stuff. It trickles down all the way down to pooping in the woods. If you do it right, you dig a hole 6 to 8 inches around, 6 to 8 inches deep, you do your business, throw everything in there, cover it back up. That's good. Let the worms do their work. No harm, no foul. It's actually, some would argue that it's good for the environment. But when people don't do that, then you start seeing toilet paper on the trail, people are stepping, they're spreading things, animals are eating them, getting sick. So if you're out there, leave no trace. Plus, it's just fun sometimes. Now, I told you that trail goes right up the East Coast. It goes through 113 towns. So it's kind of like if the trail was to come out of the woods over at the Mass-Connecticut state line down the road here, and then the town is up here where the Rotary is. Sometimes you have to hitchhike in. But if there's a coffee shop or a restaurant, or if you need a resupply for your next section, there's a Dollar General or something, we would hitchhike or walk into town and get our resupplies, because we're only going to carry like 4 or 5 days of food on our backpack, because honestly, food's heavy. It's the heaviest thing in your pack. And something else that we're just learning now is that we're burning energy all day long, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 calories a day. We are like literally drenched all day long. And what we're doing we're just burning everything up. And so we're getting really hungry. So if there's a diner or a place that sells coffee or any kind of restaurant and it's near the trail, this is what it's going to look like in the morning. Because we can't possibly carry 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day, no matter how hard we try. We would need a Sherpa. Seriously, and so we're always hungry. So the number one thing when we get close to a town is to get food, and we'll eat 2 pizzas, and get back on a trail and be just as hungry, a few hours later, because our body is craving so much. At one stop, I got off the trail, went to a McDonald's, which was a couple miles down the road. You'll hitchhike. I'm telling you. You'll stick your thumb out, the thing says Hell's Angels yearly convention, and they pull over, you're going to get in because you're so hungry, right? So one time I got off, went to a McDonald's a couple miles down the road, ate 6 double cheeseburgers, 2 big sweet teas, plus fries, got back on the trail for 2 days, went around the town, it just happened to be the way the trail went, and then you could hitchhike 2 miles back into the town, went to the same McDonald's, ate 6 more cheeseburgers, and went right back on the trail. You just can't clink it. We don't, and we don't really, my germ phobia, I would stretch it because I would go anywhere if I thought there was food or cold soda or cold beer. I'm not even a big beer drinker, but you're just craving calories. You don't even know why, you just want to eat and drink. It's crazy. Now, for the first month, I was dying. I was dying. Those mountains were killing me. My cardio was awful. For the last 20 years, I trained with state police. They're the ones that handle the whole canine certification, and they run you hard. And I was built for tactical training and wrestling with inmates. I wasn't built for humping up and down these mountains, right? So I was dying. In fact, I had a bad thing in my head that you can't get rid of once you say it. We're all guilty of it. When you're in a situation that just stinks, you just say it over and over in your head. This stinks. What am I doing here? This stinks. Why am I here? This stinks. And it doesn't stink. There's other words for it, but you know what I'm saying? It's really negative, and it doesn't help you get up that mountain. And so I was struggling with that real hard that first month. And by the time I got to the Smoky Mountains, I was losing weight, and my stamina was getting better, but it was still so much work. And then all of a sudden, I look up and see something like this, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. That's right, I'm hiking the Appalachian Trail. This is supposed to be fun. Look how beautiful it is. And it would be, and it would totally recharge me, and I'd be like, oh man, sometimes you can't see it right in front of you. And then you have to take a minute and look at it, and that will really charge you up. It might even get you up over the next mountain. But that first month was brutal. And there was a lot of beautiful scenery. In fact, this is still winter time. We're down in Georgia. We might even be in North Carolina. But the colors are muted, you know. This is during the day, just looking out over. We live in a beautiful area, let's face it. We can go west out to the Berkshires, we can go east out to the Quiet Corners in Cape Cod, and it's beautiful. North, it's beautiful. But once you get out to an area that's different than yours, you can really see it. And when I say I started seeing awesome stuff, like we'll get a text from our niece or nephew or whatever, hey, meet the cheerleading squad, or hey, I got hey, that's awesome. Well, we use that word awesome. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Oh, hey, look, I pulled whatever. That's awesome. Well, no, the real awesome is this. This is what the word awesome means. It means take your shoes off, sit down, have some lunch, drink some Kool-Aid, and that's what awesome is. And I was starting to see these awesome places. This is in the Sawtooth range of the Smoky Mountain Park, National Park, and it was starting to really open my eyes up. I was feeling a little better. Like I said, losing some weight, getting some stamina, and I could start enjoying it. I hiked the first 400 miles with this guy. You're gonna love him. I met him on like day 4. His name's Dusty Pilgrim. He's from Plymouth, Massachusetts. So obviously he wasn't born with that name. We all get these trail names. It's a fun tradition on the trail. He decided he was going to be Dusty Pilgrim, proud of his, Massachusetts roots. A retired firefighter, and he was fun to walk with. But anyway, this is the Smokies, and you can see why they called it the Smokies. By the way, they called me Sam I Am. One day, Dusty said to me, "Hey, you're Sam I Am." And let me just give you a little insight. If your name is Sam, you're Sam I Am to everybody. To people like, hey, Sam I Am. You don't go like, hey, Sam I Am. The teachers at school, hey, Sam I Am. You're just Sam I Am. So he says, you're Sam I Am. I said, yeah. He says, no, that's your trail name. I said, oh, yeah? Since when? He says, oh, a bunch of us were having a conversation this morning, and we decided, you're Sam I Am. Sometimes if you camp and it's one of them muggy afternoons, you're going to wake up and look into the valleys and it'll look like it's just a lake of clouds. This particular picture is one of my favorites, and it's atop of Whitecap Mountain in Maine. Talk about scenery, right? So the reason it's so important to me is it was the last 4,000 footer before you get to Katahdin. I still had like 60 miles to go. Just at the end of the trip, I'm beat up. I have a torn abdomen, a broken finger. Both my knees are in braces. I'm beat up. And I turn around and see this. and I'm looking south. So that means all these mountains right here, I already came over all of them to get here. And I'm on the last 4,000 footer. I'll tell you, that is one of the greatest feelings in the world. And unfortunately, the weather wasn't always great. I mean, I got some nice pictures. Oops, got some nice pictures. Yeah, not every day was rosy. This is on top of a mountain ridge. I mean, it went down 4,000 feet in each direction, and I couldn't even see, 40 yards in front of me. It was so socked in. That's an actual cloud just hitting the side of the mountain and raking over the top. Could be anywhere. I mean, the views are spectacular in that spot, so I heard. Oh, you know what? You know where that mountain is? You ever hear that song, Old Rocky Top?
Yep.
That's Rocky Top Mountain, Tennessee. And here's Dusty Pilgrim. He hated rain, by the way. He would walk with his head up. If it looked like rain, he's like, let's stop in at the next shelter. And he would stay there for the rest of the afternoon and overnight. And the only reason I'd stay with him is because I liked him so much. But he hated it. Toughest guy, I call him the Clint Eastwood of the trail, because he had a look on you. If you said hi to him, he'd lighten right up. How you doing? But on the real miserable nights, I would tie my tarp down low. My hammock is nice and close to the top there. And no matter which way the wind was blowing, I would stay dry. But if you ever camp, you know how hard it is to set up camp in the rain or break it down. So I will tell you, whoever said, rain dampers your spirit is a hiker, because rain dampers your spirits for sure. Down south, the rhododendrons were so big I could put my hammock up on them. I mean, the rhododendrons we use for our landscaping up there, they're wild down there, and they're so huge they call it the green tunnel. So you would go for 100 meters, 200 meters, just walking through these tunnels of rhododendron. It was amazing. And some of the places on the trail were epic, like this one. This is called McAfee's Knob. It's in Virginia, Catawba, Virginia, right next to Salem, Virginia. And the reason I tell you this is not to cheap plug my book, which I used the picture for the cover, but because it's so close to the road. If you got off Route 81 in Salem and you drove up to the trailhead, it's only 4 miles from the trailhead parking lot to this McAfee's Knob. And it is as epic as it looks. It's 1,400 feet down to the bottom, and it looks over the whole, it looks over where I'm heading, which is the trail just follows this ridge all the way out here, goes down here a little bit, turns back this way, and follows it all the way down there. So it's pretty epic. I knew that was coming. I had seen it in other people's videos when I was watching it before I left. But also I knew some other places were hopefully going to show up. As the hike was going on and on, I would get these targets in my mind. Like sometimes it was just a state line, and just crossing a state line, I'm telling you, if you walk like through Virginia, it's 550 miles. So all you want to do is you want to get it to West Virginia. You're so focused on it, right? It's kind of a smaller view of the whole hike. If I just kept going, hey, I only have 1,750 miles to get to Katahdin, I always shoot myself in the head, right? Because you just can't even wrap your head around it. But if you say there's only 78 miles to get to the North Carolina border, then you motivate yourself and get there. So I was doing that all the way up, and by now I'm pretty beat up. I had lost a lot of weight. I'm tired. Dusty Pilgrim went home after 400 miles. So I saw people every day and I made friends along the way, but I hiked from 400 all the way up to Connecticut, which is at this point, almost 1,500 miles by myself. And I was over it, and I was like, you know what? How many times can you get up in the morning, pack your bag, make some breakfast, hike all day, unpack, set up your tent, go to sleep, get up, hike all day? You know, it just by now I'm like, you know what? I don't even need this. As soon as I hit the Mass Pike, catching a ride to Sturbridge, I'm done. But at least I have this. I hiked all the way home from Georgia. Who's got that? I mean, that I thought was pretty cool. And the story evolves from there. But this was a big day for me. I walked home. In fact, this is Bear Mountain in Connecticut. This guy's name is Sharkbait. He used to work on a shark boat. And he got such a rash in the beginning of the hike that he stopped wearing shorts, and he just tied a shirt on the front and a shirt on the back and wore it like like a skirt the whole way. And this guy's from Maine. We got to be really good friends. On this day, after I crossed the Connecticut border, or I should say the day before, he and I started hiking together. We met down in Tennessee. He lived in the same area in Maine that I had my camp. We got to be friends, and we always talked about that. And he liked to hunt and fish. So we always bumped into each other. We would talk each other our ears off, and then we'd somehow, go our separate ways. But in Connecticut, we bumped into each other. He was pretty beat up. I was pretty beat up. I'm like, well, let's take off together. And we ended up walking the entire rest of the way together and became great friends. But this is where we started hiking together for good. Of course, you've seen this one. We all live close to this sign. That was huge because, how many times I went up to New York. I love to fish Lake Ontario. How many times I passed this sign. So walking by it was totally epic. And also, if you remember the story I just told you, this was the point where I was going to get a ride back to Sturbridge. This is that bridge over the trail, over the highway. So now that I'm walking with Red Hot, and by the way, he got his nickname because he dehydrated Red Hot sauce so he could put it on his food. But he and I were having fun the last few days, and we were like, you know what? Let's keep going. Let's see where this brings us, He came just in time. We had this little saying on a trail. It was, the trail will provide. So sometimes you break a shoelace, right? And now all of a sudden somebody coming down the trail has got extra shoelaces, right? So you're like, the trail will provide. And you're so beat up and you just want something from home, and then you walk out and there's some people on the side of the road giving hikers peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, The trail will provide. And then they believe what you want, but the trail gave me Red Hot right at the right time. Otherwise, I would never finish this trail. Know where that is? Yeah, Mount Greylock, highest point in Massachusetts. Beautiful spot. I was hoping to snowshoe it this winter, but we just didn't have it. And then this one, welcome to Vermont. So I knew I was in New England. I'm starting to get psyched. I'm having fun with Red Hot. Now I'm stepping into Vermont, one of my favorite states. And as I hiked Vermont, it became my favorite state on the trail. And then I hit New Hampshire, and that became my favorite state. Then I hit Maine, and that became my favorite state. But there were some cool things that weren't just like these epic places. There were some pretty epic things along the trail. In the source of wildlife. This is a big male black bear. Look what he's doing. Yeah. See how low his belly is to the ground? That's a big bear. Now this is late winter, so if it was Dusty and I are talking back and forth. He's saying it's not that big. I'm saying, yes, it is that big. In fact, I was on my knees going through my backpack, and Dusty said, "Sam, I am, get your camera." And I said, why? He's like, bear. I turned around and he was right up the hill from me. Yeah, I didn't sleep real sound that night because this is where my hammock was set up. I was setting up camp. So that's a male. This right here is a female. And this is in the Shenandoah National Park near the Blue Ridge Parkway. A little bit, actually it's a little bit north of there, south of there. So I come around the corner and there's 3 little bears, this big. And I come around the corner and this is a tree right here. Whenever the trail gets close to the tree, just because walking, it's all roots. So I have my head down, and I'm walking and I look up and they're cute as can be, like straight out of LL Bean Christmas catalog, about this big, standing on their back legs, looking at me. And within a second, my stomach turned. What do they tell you? Don't get caught between a bear and the cubs, I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. And this bear comes snorting up, boom! And it was kind of a snort, kind of a chomp, air, like a popping of her teeth. And all 3 bears shot straight up this tree, about twice as far as that is, gone, all the way up, as fast, in a second. And she looked at me and popped her teeth a few times. And I'm going, okay, what was it? No, act dead? No, make yourself big. No, put your hands up. I'm like, all these things going on. I'm like, too much TV, right? Yeah. And then she just sat down and she was like, trail's closed, buddy. And so I backtracked back and waited like a half an hour before coming back. She had moved on a little bit. And I just said, I'm not risking it. I went into the woods and walked a great big circle around her the whole way going, I'm over here, I'm over here. Didn't want to scare her again. Oh yeah. That is a timber rattler. I hate snakes, just so you know. I hate snakes. I am terrified of them. I grew up on a farm. Every time you grab a bale of hay, every time you go get wood in the wood pile, they just scare the living crap out of me. Okay? They're creepy. They got no legs, no arms. If they want to hurt you, they got to use their face. It's just not a cool animal. I learned more about snakes on this trip. I saw at least 40 of them. I see copperheads and I see black snakes and green snakes. Did you know the black snakes are like 8 feet long? Yeah. They're huge. I saw one crawl up a shelter, crawl across the top of the shelter, into a bird's nest, take an egg out, eat the egg, go back in, take another egg, eat the egg, take the other one egg, and then slither away. I still have nightmares about that. It was like watching a train wreck. I couldn't change my ass. But these guys right here, these snakes don't want to mess with you. In fact, they've evolved, they have that rattle. They're cool. They're just sitting there. And then they feel the ground, there's somebody coming, and they can flick your tongue out, and you're like, oh yeah, heat signature. And then what do? They don't try to scare you. They just rattle, and they're like, I'm over here. I'll kick your butt if you come over here, but right now I want to mess with you. So they end up being the coolest snake out there. And I saw 4 of them, and I saw about 36 other different ones. And I hate snakes, but this is what else there's a lot of. Every morning before you put your shoes on, check your shoes. Because spiders, they love them shoes. This one's a wolf spider. In fact, he's so big, I chased him into the woods with a stick. But not all the things that you see out there are evil or mean or gross or whatever. This little guy look at the texture on him. It's just awesome. So I'm thinking to myself, right, I took this picture in Northern Virginia, almost West Virginia, and as I'm looking at the pictures, I'm going, you know what, there's a big gap where I didn't take any pictures. I was so miserable, I lost so much weight, I was so weak, I was just not having fun, I just was out of it. But then my pictures started picking up, and I started getting all these goofy little pictures. I got pictures of flowers, I got pictures of weeds, I'm starting to get into it now. I'm really cruising along. And this happens. When this happens, it's awesome. It's like they're the little mother nature of the forest. But I bet you didn't think you were going to see one of these tonight. Yeah. I never saw a dung beetle in my life. I saw two of them. This one's not as nice as the other one, but can't find that other video. Crazy, right? So you have to look around, but sometimes you can see some pretty cool things. And also the trail itself, nature and stuff, gives out some nice rewards. If you get up to Vermont, these rivers are crystal clear, gravel and rock bottom. You can see the trout swimming around in there. You're hiking all day, you're sweaty, you're tired. It's so refreshing. I swam in every body of water I could. I'm standing. That water's so clear. I'm standing and the water's up to my chin. And then the fruit. Oh, the blueberries and the blackberries. We ate. By now, I'm talking about, I'm hiking with Red Hot. He was on the same page as I was. Man, we could graze through a berry patch for 45 minutes and never even say a word, just stuff in our faces. We were like a scene from The Walking Dead, you know, some people were walking by and we're just stuffing our faces. And we'd look up and like, hey, you know, just get back to it. We'd take them in Ziploc bags for our oatmeal and stuff. It was wonderful. But there was another type of bonus I wasn't expecting, and it comes in the form of some people that were met. This guy's name is Crazy Tree. He wasn't hiking. He was just set up on the side of the road at 7 o'clock in the morning, came through, and he making pancakes for us for free. Blueberry pancakes, beautiful sweet maple syrup. After hiking, spending the night in the woods, and popping out and seeing this guy, it was almost unreal. And we call that trail magic. When somebody just, for the love of hiking or for the love of humanity, is just doing something to make your world a little better. And it would happen. In fact, I wasn't even used to it at first. But this is one of the sweetest ones, because this is one of the first ones I ran into.
Sam, what state was that?
This was still down in Georgia. Yeah, bouncing around a little bit because I want to talk a lot about the different aspects of the trail. So I'm bouncing around a little. This is down south. This is in Franklin, North Carolina. I also put this, I would take pictures and videos all week, and then I would go to a public library, upload it onto YouTube. Both my boys, remember, they're in the service. One's in Afghanistan, the other one was in Biloxi, Mississippi. They could just turn the computer on and see what their pops was up to. So I would have to hitchhike. It ended up being a burden, but I did it all the way through. And this guy picks me up and he brings me to the library. And on the way to the library, it's just a brand new library. It's just out of town, a couple miles. Sure, I'll bring it. We get talking about trout fishing because I've been seeing all these trout. I can't wait to get back there and trout fish. And we just drive right past the library by about a mile and a half, and he brings us around. I mean, just the greatest people I started meeting. And remember now, keep this in context. I just came out of 20 years working in a prison, right? I hated people. I didn't trust anybody. I didn't even want to talk to anybody. All of a sudden, I'm meeting all these people that are so nice. This lady right here, she lives in Tennessee. She's a canine officer for the Elizabethton Police Department. Canine people kind of have this thing, just like firefighters or, you know, whatever, medical coders, you know, they're like brothers, sisters. And she hits me up, she's watching the video, and she says, on YouTube, and she says, hey, Sam, I am. She goes to my Facebook. You're close to my area. There's a bad storm coming. I want to come pick you up and take you home. And and Dusty was in my video, so I'm like, okay, cool. She's like, where you at? I said, Indian Grave Gap, something or other. She's like, I'll be there tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. So she picks us up, brings us home, cooks dinner. I watch hockey playoff games. She washes all our clothes. She lets us dry all our stuff out in the garage, her and her husband. And it was just, these people were just doing this stuff. I was like, what is going on? Like this guy right here with the water jugs, there's Dusty. That smile right there, that's the one I was talking about earlier. This guy just brings water bottles of fresh water out to this part of the trail where we're going to cross the road because it's a stretch of 12 miles without any water. What the heck? I didn't expect to see this out here, right? And then these three people on the bottom, not Dusty. Look at that smile again. These three people, Dusty and I come walking out underneath that bridge. We're just crossing, coming out of the woods, crossing underneath the highway and going back in the woods. We can smell hamburgers, hot dogs. We can hear people laughing. Like, what's going on? I don't know. They were just doing trail magic. They had beer and soda and fruit. And Dusty had just said to me, when you're this hungry all the time, not only do you just obsess on food, you dream about food, you talk about food, you tell food stories, you tell food jokes. It's just food, right? He just said to me, hey, Sam, I am. We're pulling, down the road. And I said, yeah. He goes, if you could have any fruit in the world, we do this all day long, torture ourselves, right? I said, oh, that's easy. Watermelon. We can't come underneath this bridge, and look what I'm having. I'm eating watermelon. I mean, the trail will provide, right? So the lady on the left, I hurt my knee. I wanted to go get some ibuprofen from Walmart. She drives me, I hitchhike, she drives me to town. She says, oh, you're in too much pain. You can't go back to the trail tonight. You need to spend the night in town. I'll bring you to a campground I know of. You can stay there. I said, then I'm thinking I got to get back. She goes, I got to go to church the next morning. You're welcome to come. I said, oh, well, you know what? Not to get into religion with you or anything, but I'm really not set up for church right now. Look at me. She's like, no, I'll bring you back to the trail on my way to work, on my way to church, she said. I said, okay, good. So she drops me off. She went to her church. I went back into my church. The lady on the right, same story. I get to town. I go in. I had a backpack problem. I go to an outfitter. On the wall is numbers of people to call to get you back a ride back to the trail. People are just coming out of the woodwork, these trail angels. I'm like, this is crazy. At first, when I said I couldn't handle it, that party of people this road right here, I left money on their car seat, and I told a few people, they were like, no, don't do that. They want to do that. It brings them joy. They want to be part of your hike. They want to be part of your success. It makes them happy. I'm like, wow, I never thought of it that way. So, because for Dusty and I, right, he was a firefighter. He's a guy going to help people. He's the guy getting cats out of trees and going into burning buildings. I was a guy who showed up with my dog when a police department called and says, hey, we have a lost senior citizen that needs to be tracked and found. And that was me. We were the helpers. We didn't know how to handle people helping us. So it was quite a trick. And sometimes it wasn't even the people. It was just coolers on the side of the trail. This one, it's magic. Happy trails. With love from Wonder Woman. So that sounds like a hiker trail name. Now, this isn't a shelter. This is one of the exceptions on my hike. See, this wasn't a typical shelter. It used to be a pottery barn. The people that own the pottery barn don't use it anymore. Give it to the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. They use it now as a shelter. You can see bunk beds around the outside. There was a huge, big, round plastic light. Not a light, but a window, a glass window. So that's why the lighting on here looks fake. It's because there's all this light coming through this glass thing. And I could tell you a story about every one of these guys. I mean, seriously, this guy's Walnut. His wife sent him walnuts. Teacher's a teacher. Piper carried her flute. Mad scientist. She's a scientist. Popcorn. Drop popcorn on the whole trail. Me. And then this guy in the blue. I know I ripped through that fast, but I'm getting to the meat of the story. The guy in blue. Look at that smile. Right? So the reason he's smiling. Now, we're in Pennsylvania. And so we've already hiked half of the trail. Now, it didn't take long to get me to stay at this shelter because it's close to Route 501 in Pennsylvania. And right down the road, there's a pizza joint, and they deliver to the trailhead. So I was like, I'm staying for the night. And we all ordered pizzas, and they delivered. But that's not why he's smiling, although that's reason enough, really. But he's smiling because the last 2 years he's been dealing with colon cancer. And he went through all the treatments, had to have a big portion of his colon removed, and it was touch and go there for a while, but they got him straightened out, cured. It's gone. The cancer's gone. He's got a new lease on life. He was in despair, and now he wanted to do something epic. So he decided he was going to hike the Appalachian Trail, and you could tell by that smile on his face, he's loving life. His trail name is Semicolon. Now remember that thing I said about leave no trace? So leave no trace. You don't step on vegetation just to put your tent down or everything. So here's a good challenge of your leave no trace leave no trace ethics. It had been raining for the last 48 hours, and that's the trail. It's not a brook, it's not a creek, it's a flooded trail. If you want to leave no trace, you don't want to step on new vegetation, what do you got to do? That's 48 hours of leave no trace. Yeah, but the trail's not always that bad. I mean, we have to go through some swamps. This is in New Jersey. They lay down planks, and as those planks sink into the ground, they'll put new planks on them, and they'll sink into the ground. But this was particularly hot. It's July. The bugs are out. The sun is baking. It's brutal. And if you ever wonder, this is a little bit further north, what these bog bridges, I mean, how deep the mud is. Stay on the bog bridges. That's his red neckerchief. He's an Eagle Scout, so he carries his neckerchief everywhere. But some of them are nice, like this. This is back in New Jersey. This one had like benches every half a mile, so you could stop, you can look at birds, you could just apply another layer of DEET and scratch all your mosquito bites. Now the hike's all awesome, and now let's get to the meat of the potatoes, okay? Or meat and potatoes, I should say. Once you cross the river from Vermont into New Hampshire, all 80% of your hiking is about to begin. Okay, I know I already came all the way from Georgia, but it really kicks in now because the elevation is going to be greater, the terrain is going to be harder, and the scenery is going to be more stunning. So this is a huge day. Of course, I'm looking more and more like Jerry Garcia, which I'm loving. But we're now getting into the higher elevation mountains. Now, if you're familiar with some of these peaks, Mount Moosilauke is the first 4,000 footer we cross heading into New Hampshire, to the White Mountains National Park. And the thing about it is you're looking straight at where you're going. Unlike that mountain picture I showed you where I'm looking back where I had been, this I'm looking where we're going. And I'm in pretty good shape now. I'm strong, I'm healthy, I'm feeling like a teenager again. You still wonder whether or not you can even do this. Because way off in the distance, you can't tell, but if you could see it, it would be like that, Mount Washington looming, our biggest test yet. With these elevations, you get the scenery, but you also get to see where you're going to go. Like this is tomorrow's hike right here. This is Franconia Ridge going up. Or Lafayette. Right? This one, right?
That's Lafayette.
Lafayette.
I like that ridge,
That's epic, isn't it? Yes, it is. I didn't even know it. At this point, I didn't even know what I was heading in for. And this is from just a typical site, walking through the woods, through the White Mountains by we were actually leaving one of the huts. You could sleep, you can hike 5 miles, sleep overnight in a hut that's owned by the Appalachian Trail Conservancy if you pay $150, and then you can hike back out. So you can get the whole experience and stay indoors, of cook food for you and everything. Well, this day we had hiked up to one, and there's this thing that hikers like to ask, do you need help? And they'll exchange help for a free night, which the night doesn't matter. We have our tents, but they'll feed us, right? And it's usually like Mexican food or meatloaf or whatever. So we were just leaving a night of working in one of the huts, and this was one of the scenes. But look at the views. This is New Hampshire. This is close. This is 2 to 3 hours from where we are right now. And the scenery, right? You just want to stop, take your shoes off, have some lunch. It's awesome. Drying out our clothes. This is, I remember this day like it was yesterday because we were just coming out of Pinkham Notch in New Hampshire, and we're heading up the Wildcat Mountain Range. And it's probably the hardest stretch of trail on the whole, from Georgia to Maine, because you gain like, over 1,000 feet of elevation as soon as you step off the highway. And look at Red Hot's bag, it's so stuffed. We just went into town, we got resupplied, and it's 85 degrees, we got a late start. It's probably close to noontime at this point, and I'm teasing him the whole way. I'm like, dude, what do you have in that bag? You got so much stuff. We're only going to be in the woods for like 4 or 5 days. Well, you're crazy. He always packed heavy anyway, so I was teasing him, and he's telling me to shut up and just keep going. By the time we get to the top of Wildcat, there's a platform up there. It's not like a one of those fire towers. It's lower. It's like accessible for people that go into the ski area. They can look out at Mount Washington, and it's beautiful. And we got up there, and Red Hot and I discussed it. We decided, you know what, we're sleeping on this platform tonight. It's super clear out. Remember that picture of Mount Washington? That was taken from that platform. So he puts his tent up. The bugs were driving me crazy. I whipped out some tortillas. I put some peanut butter, pepperoni, and some jelly on there, and I was just having a little supper. And sun's starting to set, and I'm like, I gotta wake Red Hot up because he's gonna miss this. This is awesome. And when I say, hey, Red Hot, come on, you gotta get out and see this, and I hear him, and he gets out of his tent, and he says, everybody should have a cake on their 50th birthday. That's what he had stuffed in that backpack all day, and I was teasing him. It was my birthday, and he brought that all the way up the mountain. Now, there's something was happening. Remember that dirty, nasty, gross onion at the beginning of the picture? Beginning picture? Well, all these trail angels were giving me these gifts of kindness, and they were just, sometimes it was an encouraging word. Sometimes they just stop when you're walking down the side of the road and they say, are you going back to the trail? And I say, yeah. And they say, hop in. Wow. Every time something like this, the pancake guy, come on, the lady from Tennessee who brought us into our house, this kept happening over and over. And every time that happened, at first I didn't feel it. Maybe because the outer layers are crunchy and ready to fall off. But it felt like each time this happened, a layer of that dirty, nasty onion was getting ripped off, and it kept happening. And then somebody would say, hey, if you don't mind dogs, I'll give you a ride. You got to ride in the back with the dog. Oh, I don't care. Whoosh, another layer would come off. I mean, this lady was in New Hampshire giving haircuts and beard trims to hikers just because she wanted to. I mean, one guy picked up 8 or 10 of us, brought us to a condominium complex, like a resort, that he had bought just to cook dinners for hikers. And then we'd wash our clothes and go back to the trail. Every time that was happening, it was like, whoosh, just another layer came off. Hey, keep up the good work. Whoosh. And by now, my videos on YouTube were really starting to get popular, and I was getting a lot of feedback from all over the country and all around the world. People were looking where I was. They would see where I'm going. They'd send a box of supplies out to a hostel and send me a note saying, hey, when you get to Damascus, check out this hiker hostel and there's a box waiting for you. When you get to Virginia, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? This is crazy. These are not the people I've been working with for the last 20 years. Even the CEOs who I have super great relationships with, friendship built 20 years of rolling around in them subblocks. They're still negative, pessimistic, hard to deal with. These are my friends, right? So I'm dealing with all these people, and it's just layer after layer of these nasty onions being pulled off. But I got to tell you, this right here, when he ever came out, by now we knew we were going to be friends forever, right? Whether we finished together or not. In fact, we knew we were going to finish together at this point, but when he ever came out of that tent with that cake, I got to admit something inside. I don't know what it was. It's hard for me to even talk about it because I get so emotional, but something snapped. And it was like that final layer of the onion. It was that moment where I all of a sudden found some renewed faith in humanity when I realized that everybody wasn't like what I was doing. So if I got one thing from this trails, this is it. Whatever they did to get those layers of onion peeled. But this one, that goofy looking guy right there, my best friend on earth, he was the last layer. But we were still not done. We still had to get to Maine, which was a day and a half away. We still had to get 285 miles of Maine. So we, eat that cake, fight over who's going to lick the cover out, and chew on them candles, and let's keep going. We still had the Northern Presidential to do. These were pretty rugged. I'm standing right on top of Mount Madison right now. And we have to go all the way down to the bottom and below tree line in this picture. That was one heck of a day. And then we crossed into Maine, and we thought, well, what could get higher than the White Mountains? Well, wouldn't you know, it's Mahoosucs. And then you have the Bigelows, and it's just never ending. Everything started like gravel, small rocks, a lot of broken rocks, bigger hills, bigger boulders, giant mountains, bigger boulders. The trail just kept getting harder and harder. In this picture, Red Scott, he's in kind of a bad mood because he just dropped his pole down a crevasse, and he had to hold my feet while I crawled down to get it. And when I got down there were two other poles beside his down there. So I kept telling him, somebody had a worse day than you, buddy. But the trail, when I say the trail was rugged, look at they had to drill into the side of the mountain and put steps. But it was beautiful. If it wasn't just hardcore rocks, everything was covered with a blanket of moss up in Maine. And then you had to deal with a lot of roots. And when I say a lot of roots, I mean a lot of roots. Those trees they're growing on just a foot or less in places of soil. So the only thing keeping them trees up are those roots from the neighboring trees and the trees in back of them. And when the wind blows, the ground all goes up and down. Well, unfortunately, that's great for the trees, but it stinks for hiking because it just doesn't end. And that cuts your time down from 2.5 miles per hour to about less than a mile per hour. And the lakes, you would walk out and see these lakes, you couldn't even see the ends of them. And at night, if you were lucky enough to camp by a lake, there was not a light on it, no motorboats, no camps, no nothing. Just silent. All you heard was, woo! Loons all night long. It was amazing. And I would swim in every body of water. You just walk out, take your clothes off, bring off all the salt, put it back on, you soak it wet anyway, and just keep hiking. Well, we're pretty hot in this picture. This is August now. In Love and Light. This lake was so huge, and the trail, this is the trail. The trail came out of the wood. See all the footprints? That's the trail. I mean, come on. It's just amazing. Not in Woodstock anymore. Eventually, I got to see that mountain. This is the first view. I mean, there's a couple places we could see it from farther away, but it wasn't clear. And so this is the first time getting a look at Mount Katahdin. The mountain I've been obsessing on for the last 6 months. Sure, I've been there before. Saw it every time I looked out my garage on my driveway, every time I pulled in and out of the yard up there. But it looked different. It looked bigger. It looked awesome. It looked like, this thing I've been thinking about. It was almost bigger, larger than life. So we decided we're not going to hike it today. We're going to hike it tomorrow morning. We're going to go up 5.5 miles, down 5.5 miles, savor it. Tonight we sleep. So the sun pops up. This is actually a good view of how we're going to get up there. And we start out. Now, I know it's hard to tell what this picture is of. Let me see if I can try something. If you look way at the top, those are people. And then right here, there's people. I don't know if that's a person. Yeah, that's a person. So it's so huge, it's hard to really get the real idea. That peak that you were just looking at right there is this peak taken from the bottom, not where we are, but down below the clouds. Isn't that crazy? And there were so many people, and Red Hot and I were so crazy. We were like high on life. We were drunk. We were so silly. You guys would have kicked us out of your life. You would have been like, get away from me. We walked by somebody and I said, Red Sox. He'd be like, yeah. I'm like, Yankees. He'd be like, woo. We're just acted so silly, and we're cruising past everybody. We've been hiking for 6 months. Every time the mountain was so full of people, we were passing people. All you could smell was Bounce fabric softener and hair products and deodorants, and we're like, "Ah, this is wonderful." This is those are the Highlands of Maine. You got Bangor and Lincoln and Millinockets out there. And then you have the tabletop on top of Mount Katahdin. You have about 1.5 miles where it's nice, almost level. Thoreau Springs is here, where Thoreau, he climbed the mountain, and this is where he started writing the book, Maine Woods. But way up there, that's where we're headed. That's Baxter's Peak, and that's South Peak, a few feet lower. And here we are. Now we are finally there. In fact, it was such a big deal. The weather was so nice. The weather the previous day was bad. Nobody could climb the mountain, so twice as many people get up there. We get to the top, and we're looking forward to this mountaintop experience, and there were just hundreds of people. So I'm standing on Baxter Peak. That's South Peak right there. We're at the end of our journey, and this is how it went down. That's us coming up the hill. 6 months, 2,189 miles, 5 million steps. All comes down to this.
Where's your pack?
I dropped it when I gave the guy my camera.
Yeah.
We couldn't talk. We were overwhelmed. There were so many people around. We didn't see any of them. I mean, just to just wait for our turn there, and you see Red Hot. He's been wanting to do this since he was 15 years old. He's not like me. I wanted to do it for about a month. Planned it for a month. He's been planning for his whole life. We wanted to say something. Neither one of us could talk. I even let a whoop out, and my voice cracked. So it was a pretty epic moment in my life. I was just thinking about it before I got here today. I was thinking, I'm coming to do a library talk about this epic thing I did, right? And this epic moment. And I just saw something on like the Lord of the Rings last night. The guy's like, it's just a journey if you don't do it with somebody. Then it's an adventure, right? That line came right out of J.R.R. Tolkien or whatever. And I was like, man, it's so true. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to make my adventure our adventure, right? But we hit Nux like we did on the top of every mountain. One more down, one more down, one more down. This was the last one. And it was pretty amazing, and we went through a lot of things. You could see the before, and the after, just totally transforming physically. But really, the mental part, the mental game, that whole onion thing was too much. These people, I expected the snakes and the spiders, and I expected the rivers, and I expected the rain and the snow. I expected the mountains and the valleys, and every one of them something gaps that I had to go down and back up. But I didn't expect the people, like these people in New Jersey that have a club, and for 3 or 4 weeks a year, they do hiker trash trail magic. They call us hiker trash because we smell like trash and we look like trash. And I didn't expect this guy. He's the guy that bought the condominium just to bring people, 2 condominiums next to each other, just to bring us home and let us hike. I didn't expect the guy to say, if you like dogs, get in, right? And this lady in Vermont says, are you guys through hikers? And we said, not yet, because we didn't want to put a goocher on us. So she said, I've been waiting for 2 through hikers all day. Why? So I could give you a sandwich. She made a sandwich and brought it out to the trail. I wasn't ready for any of this stuff. I wasn't ready for Dirty Ernie and Grumpy Old Lady. He's a through hiker from 2007, and they just set up a tent with their camper, and they spent like 2 weeks on this one patch of dirt where we crossed the road, and giving us sodas and beers and whatever we want. I didn't expect this stoner to stop and have open his door with smoke coming out like a Cheech and Chong movie and saying, "Hey, you need a ride to work? I mean, to ride to town?" And I was like, "Yes, I do. I know I'm taking my life in my hands, but I need a ride." And I didn't expect to find just coolers of soda and food on the trail. So all those things just added to this hike. I think that had as much impact on my hike as anything else. These people watch my videos. They met me in Pennsylvania, gave trail magic to everybody that walked by that day, just so they could give me trail magic and resupply me. We've been very good friends ever since. I didn't expect, to make it to Connecticut. This is Goose Pond Road or something right here in Mass, or by Lee. My friends from work, my work, where I work in the career, over at the prison, they started coming out. Just the feeling you get. This guy doesn't speak a lick of English. He says, "What is AT?" Because I was holding a sign. I wanted to ride back to the AT. I said, "It's a trail." He says, "Oh, yeah, get in." And we drove in his 1985 RX-7. I hadn't seen one in 20 years, And this lady, she was, I'm telling you, she was living in this car. And she pulled over to give me a ride because for whatever reason, she wanted to be kind enough to help me out and not worry about her problems for a few minutes. Gave me a ride to town. And then again, the lady I was telling you about, who was doing trail magic just by cutting hair and trimming beards. And this lady who was watching my videos knew I loved iced tea, so she hid a gallon of iced tea in a creek and told me where to find it. And this guy, who in the last place you'd expect, in the 100-mile wilderness on a dirt road, he had soda, beer, and donuts. And then, of course, the boxes of food that came from all around the country. I couldn't even eat it all. I handed it out to my fellow hikers and friends that I made on the trail. It just was amazing. The outpouring. I got a box of so much food, and I was at a church hostel in Virginia. I opened it up, and it's full of bottles of Jack Daniels and Hefty schnapps, and they have a strict no alcohol policy. So when I talk about those things, peeling the layers of the onion off, hopefully you can get an idea of what I mean. But if there was one reason, and one reason alone, that I am glad that I walked through every snowstorm, every rainstorm, every windstorm, every mountain up, every mountain down, hurt both knees, had to have them surgically removed, taken care of. I fell in Vermont down a freaking cliff. I ripped my abdomen. I broke my finger. I lost so much weight I was unhealthy. But if there was one reason why all that it was epic, is because of this note I got. I passed. I put out my last video, and I thanked everybody for watching. And after that came back in, a lot of people. After I put it up, a lot of people sent messages. They sent messages via email. They sent messages on Facebook. They sent messages on YouTube, Instagram. And I tried to answer them all. I'm just doing it for hours and hours. And I'm calling red hot. I'm like, "Dude, are you seeing this?" He's like, "Oh, yeah, oh my God, I can't believe it." And then I got to this one. And it stopped me in my tracks. So I'll read it. You can follow along. "Thank you, Sam and Red, for allowing myself and everyone else to hike the trail with you through your eyes. What a beautiful experience." He said, "Thanks for the thoughtful comment. You're so welcome. You really have no idea how much it meant to me. I've been diagnosed with terminal cancer and given less than 11 months on this beautiful earth. So following you meant the world to me. Thank you and Red. Now I can leave this beautiful earth in peace. God bless." I mean, I couldn't even hear. I could just hear my heart beating in my chest. I read it over again with tears in my eyes, and I tried to get message him back, and he wouldn't message, and I tried Google searching him and sent messages, and of course I knew why he wasn't answering, you know. But man, I didn't know it. But when I was miserable and I was saying, this sucks, what am I doing? I just know next time I'm going home. This stinks. And just in so much pain and in so much misery and so unhappy, and the process, you know, and I was going through the process. I didn't know I was going through the process, but I was doing it. John was watching. When I wanted to quit in Massachusetts and go home, John was watching. I didn't quit. The mountains got big in New Hampshire, and I got hurt, and I didn't quit, and I made it all the way to Katahdin, and it was great personally, but I didn't know John was watching, and I'm glad for every step, because you never know. So basically in life, you don't know who's having a bad day and who's having a good day, right? You don't know somebody who's dying of cancer and he's watching your videos, and it's bringing him something he needs right then. So I guess that was my big change. That's what I got from this hike. John taught me, you know, maybe somebody needs a smile. Maybe somebody needs you to hold that door or wave or whatever. Maybe they just need a hello. So that's how this trail's changed me. So thank you. Thank you very much. So I have time if you guys have any questions. I know that's kind of heavy, but that's the whole story. That's some people get some things and other people get others. And I got John. And John, one note changed me.
Where's your place in Maine, and do you still have it?
Place was in Lincoln, just south of Millinocket,
Okay.
and I sold it.
Yeah.
And I ended up moving back to Maine when I got off the trail,
Yeah.
and for a year, and then I fell in love with my old high school sweetheart, moved back to Connecticut, married her, got our anniversary coming up next month.
We still have a place in Greenville.
Oh.
On Moosehead.
Oh, Greenville's
Yeah.
awesome. Yep, Maine's awesome.
Thank you.
So
Very
you're
nice.
welcome. So listen, real quick. I'm only going to do this because you know I got it. You know I need. But I've been told, and you can go on Amazon and read the reviews. I've been told it's a pretty good book. Just the same story with a little bit more detail, a little bit more characters. And if you're interested, go on to Amazon or tell Barnes and Noble you want one or whatever. Or if I got a few here, I hate to sell them here, but if you want one to take home, I'll give it to you. But I've been told it's pretty good. I only read it once. Writing that took me as long as hiking the whole trail did.
You think you'll do another trail?
Am I going to do another little trail? So my wife, another long trail? Yeah. So the answer to that is, if my wife says to me tomorrow, man, I really want to do the Appalachian Trails, I'll do it. If she wants to do the PCT or the CDC or the Colorado Trail or Arizona, whatever she says, I'm down. We hike a lot. I love to hike. The only reason I'm not doing a trail right now is I don't want to leave her for 6 months. I have too much fun when I'm with her, you know? So, yeah, I'm ready for another trail. And I even told her if she wanted to hike the trail, I would like follow her with our camper, and every trailhead she could take a shower and get food and keep going.
I was gonna say, you can hike the PCT or go north to south, I heard.
I would love it. I would love it because I love eating up trails. I don't know what's around the next corner or over the next hill. So until I find out, I want to go and hike it, you know?
The long trail's nice first.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I did a section of Long Trail that
Yeah.
almost killed me this summer.
Yeah.
Not only did it was the Camel's Hump section,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Brutal.
Yeah.
No like warm up, just got right out
Even
there,
Mount
killed
Abraham,
myself.
When you get up to Mount Abraham, there are guys up there that are training for K2.
Right,
It's like,
so I get to see those guys.
Yeah.
So I hiked it, and then I got off the trail. My friends were through hiking, so I jumped in with them for 3 days. Hiked for 3 days. I said, okay, I'll take it off. I went camped, got myself out to the road, was hitchhiking back to town, and would you know, the people that picked me up, I forgot my poles in the car, poles that I took on the whole Appalachian Trail, and they gave me COVID.
Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Hey, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah.
Enjoy.